Hello, Claire Hewitt.
Hello, Svend-Erik. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good here in the apartment. We have made a studio. Alice is working on our book, and we just, do things in our home like everybody. What about you?
Similar, but I have a garden, as you know, Svend-Erik, that goes out from my house, and I have a little hut at the bottom of the garden.
How did you become a storyteller?
That's a big question, but a small one at the same time. I've always, from being tiny, I've loved to listen to grown-ups, like my mum and dad, but especially my grandparents, just telling me their life stories, and I remember those stories. But I was thinking about this, and it was one particular friend of my father's that he brought into the house, who was a very special man, and his name was Johan Johansson, and he was a sea captain who had been born in Tromsø in the Arctic Circle. And he brought stories of the North into my little house, family house in Cheshire, which was by the River Weaver. I was like, what, snow and ice and magic and reindeer? And he brought me a sealskin belt.
Whoa.
And he brought me reindeer boots, and he brought me a whale's tooth. And I went to Norway when I was 16, and as a little girl, my imagination had been captured totally by this man. And I was a very dreamy little girl, spent a lot of time in our garden and playing games. But so that kind of inspired the story listener in me, and the need for adventuring and journeying. So at 23, after finishing at art school, I found myself in East Africa, and I found myself sitting at the feet of probably the ancestors of the first people on this earth, and sitting at an old man's feet who's a sandal diviner, DuEt. I think years later I realized that I had sat at the feet of the first storytellers, really, with the Picot. And it inspired me to seek the stories of the nomadic peoples. And so that's been my journey. And this book was my first book that a friend gave me when I started on my journey as a storyteller. It's this one.
Oh, it looks lovely. Siberian folk tale. Oh yeah.
I know. And from that, from these stories and this love of the North, I have traveled, I have worked in Finland, and I have friends who are Sami up in the north, and I have visited them at a time when there is no sun and a time when there is no darkness. So it's, for me, I have to visit stories from the places that I have traveled through.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I saw when I was walking around with you in the area where you live. You always connect your story to the place, the sea, landscape, you see a stone, and then you connect it to that. It actually reminds me when you told me the story about how you started as a storyteller. The first story I ever heard that really fascinated me was Thompson in our little summer house. That's like a little cottage, but it's not really out in the countryside. It's more like in between in the suburb. And we had this very nice summer house there. We call it a kolonihavehus. And Thompson was telling a story about a witch. And I remember how he then took his hair and made it really wild and went like this. And he came towards me. I was going like, what's going to happen to me now? But Thompson was not, I mean, he saved my life or whatever happened. And then I remember this fascination, this very different way of of being together with a child, this story that he told me right there in that spot in the Kolonihavehus is one of my first experience with a storyteller that really brought me into another world. But
Yeah.
Claire, please, what have you brought into the DuEt?
Well, I have brought a gathering song, a wee gathering song by Corinne Polwart, and a little story about why stories, which was gifted to me by a storyteller who lives in Oslo called Georgiana Kiebler. So I'd like to share that if you would like to listen. Welcome into this house where we have bread to eat and there's room at the table. Welcome into this house where we sit down and meet with neighbors and strangers. Come away in, come away in. The storm, it is rising, but we'll hold back the wind. Come away in. Welcome into this house where there's an open door and the fire is burning. Welcome into this house where we can rest a while from the world and its turning. Come away in, come away in. The storm, it is rising, but we'll hold back the wind. Come away in. It was early spring, and in a village right near you, there was a gathering for the first time after a long winter, where people didn't see each other for a long time. And they gathered in the market square and set their stalls up, and there was fresh bread, and there were the makings of over the winter, the weavings and the spinnings and the stitchings. And when from a river, not so far away, a figure could be seen walking towards the village. Now, if you'd been there and you'd seen him, you would have noticed that his skin had a green hue about it. His eyes sparkled like the blue summer sky. His hair softly flowed like soft green new leaves over his shoulders. But you would have also noticed that he didn't have a stitch of clothing on him. And he walked towards the market square, and everybody's voices were like the birds at the moment, nesting, chattering, this and that. How are you? When suddenly somebody noticed this bare naked man walking into the square, hiding their children behind their skirts. Don't look at that bare naked man, he's rude. Shutting doors, shutting the curtains, shutting everything away so that nobody could see the young man. And there he stood, all on his own, apart from a cat who wound itself round his legs. And he sighed, a great deep sigh, and off he walked and away he walked, and he walked into the deepest, the most ancient of forests. Time passed, and the summer came, and again there was a great gathering in the marketplace, and butter and fresh cheeses, and it was abundant, the produce in that market, when from the same river there walked a young woman. She was dressed in the most beautiful of cloaks. It rippled around her feet, and on every bit of the fabric there was stitched in the finest of stitches. Trees, sun, moon, stars, planets, birds of the air, all that flew and all that grew. It was beautiful. And she came into the square and took a little chair and sat upon it. And very soon, it was the children who noticed her. And she sat there quietly playing. And one by one, children came and gathered around her. "What's that?" said one child. "What's that on your cloak?" "Why," she said, "it's a hare." Said the young woman, "I have a story about hair. How it got to have such long ears." And the children listened to the story. Another child said, "What's that?" "Oh, that's the moon. Shall I tell you the story about how the hare rescued the light back into the world?" Well, one by one, the stories were told of how the animals and birds came to be, how the trees came to be. And even the old ones, they gathered around and sat and rested their weary bones. And as the sun started to go down, everyone packed up and gathered around the young woman. "Tell us some more stories, please, please." But eventually, she stood up and without a word, gathered her cloak about her and began to walk away from her circle of friends. "Please don't go, please don't go." And then they watched silently. And it was like a deep breath as she left and walked towards the deep, ancient forest. Well, she walked and she walked along a mossy path that wound its way through the trees. And ahead she could see a figure. It was the young man. There he was. And he peeked and he peeked from behind the tree. And he said, "Who are you? Who are you that sits in the square and everyone gathers at your feet? Whereas with me, when I walked into the square, everyone hid themselves, battened down the hatches, hid their faces. No, so who are you?" "Ah," she said, "my name is Story. I tell stories 10 miles high and everyone wants to listen to me. Can you tell me your name?" "My name," said the young man, "my name is Truth." Ah, she laughed. She laughed until her belly hurt. And she said, "Here," and she took off her cloak and she split it in half. And she surrounded and enfolded the young man in half of her beautiful cloak. And she said, "From now on, cover yourself in these beautiful stories, Truth. For not everyone wants to see the bare, naked truth, but they will listen to your stories."
Oh, thank you. That was brilliant. I loved it. And the little ding, 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 and you just, oh, it's magic. Oh, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, oh, a piece of, what kind of wood is that?
Birch.
Ah, it's nice. It's nice. Mm. So I was inspired when you told about the river. Papadopoulos was without fear. He was strong and powerful, and he did not want to be ruled by any man or any king or anything that knew fear. He wanted a king that was fearless. So he walked up to the king and said, "Are you afraid of anything?" No, not at all." "Well, that's good. I will serve you then." And then he started serving this king. But at one point, he said, "Oh, when you hurt yourself." And I said, "Oh, what the hell? And then the king said, no, no, don't say hell. Why not? In hell, the devil is, and I'm afraid of him. And so Papadopoulos said, if you're afraid of the devil, I can't serve you. I will go and find the devil. Then he walked down into hell and he said to the devil, are you afraid of anything? No, of course not. I'm the devil. I'm not afraid of anything at all. So Papadopoulos started to serve the devil. And he was fearsome, he was strong, and he was powerful. And that worked very well for the devil. But one day they passed a cross. And the cross, the shadow of the cross, here came upon the devil. And he went like, and Papadopoulos said, are you afraid of that cross? No, said the devil, but I'm afraid of what it symbolizes. It's a man with a big heart. It's Jesus Christ. I can't serve you afraid of anything. I will go and find this Jesus Christ then. And he searched and he searched and he searched. He couldn't find him. But at the river, that's when I got the inspiration when you said about this river. By the river, there was a man, an old man, taking people from one shore to the other, back and forth, back and forth. And when Papadopoulos came to him, he said, I'm looking for Christ. I'm looking for Jesus Christ. And the old man said, well, you won't find him out there in the world. He's in here. So what you shall do is you should take over my job. Let people go from one shore to the other, serve the people, be kind to them. And so Papadopoulos did. For many years, he just sailed back and forth. But one night, in a stormy night, really, really heavy storm, there was a 12-year-old kid coming to him and said, can you let me pass the river? Wow, yeah, I can do that. You have to be on my back here. And then Papadopoulos started walking into the river. And as soon as he did, his first step, it was like, oh, this is a heavy boy. My God, he's heavy. And then the river started sort of coming up, 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 and it became very powerful. It wanted to take Papadopoulos away. But Papadopoulos was strong. But with this burden on his shoulder, it was only because he really used all the power that he had that he could bring the little boy to the other shore. And once he settled him down, he was like, oh, I feel like I carry the world upon my shoulder. And the little boy said, yes, that's exactly what you have done. I am what you have been searching for a long time now. And I have taken the burden of all the people's sort of deeds and all that, the guilt on my shoulder, and you had carried that over the water. That's why you shall no longer be named Papadopoulos, but your name is now Christopher, the one who carried Christ over the water.
That's beautiful. That's
like
so
that?
beautiful. Yes. Yeah.
You knew the story?
I did not know the story.
Oh,
No.
No. It's a nice
But
story
thank
about
you.
river. So. Thank you for giving me that inspiration, and thank you for the story.
My pleasure. Well, thank you for sharing that story with me and inviting me to this place.
I still have my prepared story to go, you know, and then it's your turn to give me an improv story that sort of came from the inspiration, because we're going to talk about water one more time here. I'm going to teach you a Danish word. It's skæve.
Skæve.
Very good, very, very good. And it means to be bended. And this boy's name was Scabbard because his father had died during the war in 1848. We are in the southern part of Denmark, a very flat country called Lolland. And he grew up there with I think it called it wreckage. We call it the English disease. That means that you don't have a lot of D vitamins, so your bones get a little, like, they they crush a little. There's something going on there. That's why he was called Skæve, to bend, because his back suddenly went, like, on a little side like this. So he was always walking around like this, And you should think that this was then being mocked a lot, right? But no, because he had a lot of self-confidence. His mother loved him just as much as you could ever love anyone. And he was bright, he was clever, he was fun to be with. Every time they were playing something like Indians and soldiers or cowboys, whatever they were doing, he had an imagination. It was fun to be together with Scabbard. So instead of mocking him, it was like, Scabbard, come over here, we're going to play this. And he was like, yeah, I come around. And he has another twist, another thought that they could never come up with themselves. So Scabbard was quite popular. And then, as he grew up, one of the things that he could do was make a woman laugh, right? You know how important that is. I mean, most men think the most important thing is look good and be strong and no. If you can make a woman laugh, that's the key to her heart. That's where she goes like, oh God. And he could do that. And another thing, he could also give a compliment in the right time. Not just say, oh, how beautiful you are with blah, blah, blah. No, it was the right time. He just got it. So when he was this young man, all the girls were just going, oh, Scabbard. And none of the other men understood what was going on. This cripple, this guy with the... He was engaged. He had a job. He got himself a job very young. He was 18 years old when he became a gardener, assistant to the gardener at a big mansion called Øllingsø. You don't have to learn that. It's very but it's Øllingsø. Down at Lolland. And then he, of course, when you are a gardener, you talk a lot with the woman in charge of the household. We call her the House Maiden, Husjomfru. Very important, high status. And she was then started talking with Skæve. The first thing she noticed was he made her laugh. Second, he noticed he made compliments to her about how she looked, the dress and everything. And not just stupid compliments, but truly like the... So she became to catch her. He caught her attention. And they started walking around after hours of work. And then they found themselves sitting on the bench, the moon, and then suddenly they held each other's hand. And that became a romance. They were really, really, truly happy. And she loved Scabbard and he loved her back. On that farm, on that mansion, there was a quite important man who was taking care of all the rest. He was also a nobleman. And he came to Husjomfruen and said, this Scabbard guy, he's under your status. You should marry him. I heard that you're going to marry him here in the midsummer. He's a cripple as well. And then she got so furious and just told him to leave, get out of my house. I love the man and I'm going to marry him. And so they were married. Scabbard and Husjomfruen stood there in the little church. There were not a lot of people. Scabbard's mother was there, of course, who loved him just as much as she always loved him. And she loved Husjomfruen as well. And the owner of the farm, the big mansion, and it was only a little group, but it was very, very nice wedding. These days when it's really hot, you can hardly breathe. You're only longing for the thunder. That day it was. sweat here on pearly on their lips, and it was really, really hot. So in the night, they were giving a little, there was a little cottage with entrance just right out to the big park and this mansion. They was giving that as a kind of, they could celebrate their honeymoon, that's wonderful wedding night. And then Husjomfruen said to Scabbard, I go and prepare myself for the night. Yeah, do that, said Scabbard. I will go and have myself a pipe. And there's a very special pipe, a long white one, you know, and it turns around here and you press this tobacco, very rough tobacco, and then you light it. And then you sit with this, it's nearly cold smoke because this pipe is so long, and he loved it. That was one of his favorite things to do. So while she was in the bathroom preparing herself, he was sitting there with a little pipe. When she came out, the thunder had started. The rain was pouring down. And she didn't understand a word because he didn't come back. Scabbard! Scabbard, where are you? You can come in now. Don't make a fool of it. Come on, come inside. Scabbard? He didn't come back to her. So she ran in the rain and the thunder. She ran up to the mother's house, Scabbard's mother's house, and asked, have you seen my husband? He's gone. He just disappeared. No, I haven't. So they started looking in the rain, and they got all the people up there in the middle of the night and were searching around for him. They couldn't find him. They searched for him the next day, a whole week. After a while, they stopped searching for him, and he was just gone, just gone. Then you remember the forvalter, the guy with the you shouldn't marry him, all that. He came to Husjomfruen and said, he's probably been afraid of what you do in a wedding night, you know, with the cripple and everything. Get out of my house. Get out of my house. And then he looked at her belly. It was swollen. And she gave birth not long after that to a wonderful, wonderful child, a boy with a spine as strict as you can ever get them. And he grew up to become a lovely, lovely boy. But then the 13th of November, 1872, there was a big tsunami flood in that area. It covered the whole area, and it was a disaster. There were not a lot of people dying, but the whole landscape was full of this salty water. And there were bodies lying around, human beings, cows, sheep died there. It was really, really a horrible day. And then as they were walking around, suddenly somebody said, there's a hand here sticking out from the ground, from the soil. And it was like, what is the hand doing buried? I mean, all the other bodies that they found was lying in the water. And so they digged him up. And what did they see? A headless body, but with a bent, very clear bended back. So that was Scabbard. Somebody had killed him that night, chopped his head off, and buried him in that place there. When they buried him, his son was there, his Husjomfrue was there, standing there, and they were crying, and they buried him in the soil. And in the evening, a young couple passed by, and suddenly what they saw was this coffin, because it'd been raining and the soil was still full of water. So this coffin just came up, like Scabbard was saying, you haven't finished the job. you need my head as well. I'm not just going to be buried with my body. And this coffin was standing there, nearly like coming up with that. So they took the coffin and placed it in the church. That winter, there was a lot of suffering in Lolland, and all the storehouses were empty. And in the big mansion, in a forest corner, far, 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 far in there, they found 2 sacks, in sick. One with a skull crushed here with an axe. And they found the axe with blood on, and they found the pipe broken. And when they found that, they wanted to talk to the magazineverwalter, the guy with it, you shouldn't marry him and all that. When they found him hanging. He had hanged himself because he knew what was coming to him. When they took that head with the skull crushed like that and placed it in a coffin with the rest of Scabbard and buried him for the second time, he stayed down in the soil.
Well,
that was my story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The essence of the soul of that story, there is so much suffering in it, but there's that great love. There's that great love of the children and happiness and kindness and compassion and all, and yeah, there's so much in that story.
Thank you.
And I was thinking, what would I give you in return for that story that had the essence of it in? And it's a song. The song. Is that okay? Yeah. Ve mi ovano, ve mi ovani, ve mi orovano, saramai without thee. When I'm lonely, dear white heart, dark the night or wild the sea, my love's light, my foot's finds the old pathway to thee. Thou art the music of my heart, harp of joy, O Ruach Muchri, moon of guidance by night, strength and light, thou art to me. Ver mi ovano, ver mi ovani, ver mi rovano, smi fovran stugauni.
What a lovely song. Thank you. I actually think what you did was taking all this, and I could feel all the emotions in the moment you did it. You just took the emotions and gave it words and gave it this tune, because it's a very sad in a way, but also very, very pointing out possibilities. And we really need that in these times, I think. This sadness. We know what there's a lot of sorrows around, there's a lot of sadness around, but we also need the hope. We
do need hope. And I was thinking about this, Sven, and I was thinking, if it gives the earth time to breathe, if it gives the earth, because we have been denying as a human race the earth, the possibility of breathing well. Over the years, the air pollution has been getting worse and worse, and we are suffering too because of that. So if it gives us a chance to breathe, that's, can be positive. And I was also wondering if one day, because the animal kingdom and the birds seem to be getting a little closer, closer down, and maybe one day I'll look out of my window from my little house and I'll see deer and beaver maybe, and badger and hare lolloping along my road.
Have you seen down in Wales that these goats are walking in the town now?
Yes.
Yeah, taking over. Well, there's nobody around, so let's go in and take it. Claire, thank you so much for this. It's been such a joy, and take good care out there and good luck.
And you.
Yeah.
And you. Lots of love. Lots of love to you and Alice.
Thank you to Robin. Take care.
Lovely.
Bye.
Bye, love.